Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So things have been a little bit stressful recently, and it kind of made me want to just go back to having a little bit of fun in Blender, low stakes, experimental, play around, learn a few tips, see what happens. And recently, a really good friend of mine called Haley gave me some of the Marathon character models. So these are the shells. They're not taken from the game. I believe they're taken from the Tau Ceti website, which is a bit more of a fun site that I think played into the ARG for the game. So Bungie, I hope you're okay with me playing with the models. I have done fan art in the past for another Bungie title, being Destiny 2. You may remember when I made my own personal ghost. So that was made from scratch, that old one, but obviously I have not made these models. But the thing is, I've always had a bit of a thing when it comes to using other people's content. I try and avoid it like the plague. There have been exceptions to that, for example, using statues from Sketchfab when testing out different lighting setups. But the thing is, to kind of help lighten my mood a bit, I thought, you know what, I like Marathon. I like these characters. Let's just play with it. Let's see what happens. So over the span of a few hours on that evening, these are the renders I came up with. I could have done 1,000 more of these. They're really fun. So just for some context, this is using Blender. This is using, and I'm sorry if this will be a plug, but it's my own tool, right? This is using the Afterglow lighting asset library for lighting. All of the lights are emission-based lights. So again, they're mesh lights, which are providing light to the path traced engine because of the emission value on the shader. And specifically, this is using Studio Cage 9, which is one of my favorite presets, which I've adapted afterwards. The reason why all of the kind of background lighting looks consistent across all of these renders is because I'm using a bit of a trick with the camera pivot. You may notice up in the corner, I've got a camera pivot, which is just an empty object from which all of the cameras are attached. But you'll also notice that all of the major scene lighting and, importantly, the light catcher are attached to the pivot as well, which means that, say we get a relatively nice angle on a character we like, or even an object, let me bring in like a gun, I can, if I like, move the camera locally within this pivot space. So let's say I get here, maybe I want to actually move the gun, whoops, let's grab the whole thing, and move that into the center point of where the pivot is. And then in theory, what it means is we can kind of rotate and then get new angles without massively disturbing the background lighting. Now you may notice a bit of pink coming in there as well. So this is another little trick I was playing with, but maybe we'll get onto that a little bit later. So this is one trick I was using for getting compositional angles is I would just kind of do some rotations, almost like I'm inspecting the object using the pivot. Like in a video game, you can inspect guns sometimes. You can look around them like that. It's a bit like this. And then I think, oh, actually, hold on, that's pretty cool. Let's just do some fine local movements with the camera. Let's grab the depth of field object. Another little tip, by the way, is I like to use the bottom right with a 3D view to help me move things around the scene. In this case, the angle's a bit weird, but I've got a local transform and the depth of field target object is actually kind of running parallel to the center point of the camera. It's not perfect because I was a bit lazy when I set it up, but it means I don't really have to do it in my main 3D view. I can just scrub it back and forth here and see where it ends up. Now, obviously, you can do all sorts of constraints to move a depth of field object, but I like using this method. So you can see that as I rotate, it's trying to keep the focus within a certain point. It's going to be a plane coming out from where that depth of field object is. So right now it's kind of relatively around the middle. So I might take a render of that if I was doing this and then carry on. But let me reset things. So the angles of the pivot are back to normal. So I've reset the rotation to 0 on the pivot. Let's just move this somewhere more appropriate. And I'm going to show you the volume trick. So I'm going to make the gun maybe point upwards a little bit. Let's do a local movement on the camera a bit. I mean, this will look better on a character, but I'll just give you a quick rundown here. So I've got a volume cube in the space. You can see in the corner. And this cube, if I render very quickly down here, you can see, even though it's quite small in the corner of the screen, it's a gradient that kind of stops partway. Actually, I've got the nodes here. You can copy them down if you like, although this is a custom node from my node group tools, but it can just be a value. Now, the gradient I had was quite tight, but if you keep an eye down in the bottom right while I expand this color ramp, you'll see that it kind of phases up a bit more. And then I use this subtract value, if I do it very carefully, to kind of stretch out the gradient a bit. Actually, specifically, the subtract is an offset and the divide afterwards stretches out the gradient so you can make it more subtle. And what it kind of allows you to do is get a color gradient across the space. Now, it looks a bit weird here, but from certain angles, it's nice to get a color gradient. Adds a certain style to it. Like I said, with characters in particular, with the right kind of color combination, it can be something, like a little bit dramatic. So check as I rotate here, got a bit of the orange volume coming up. And it's just a cool addition to the lighting. you can imagine doing like all sorts of turnarounds, like turntables from cool angles, quite cinematic. Let's get rid of some of these extra details. So this is probably a good demonstration for it. I can just add to the subtract to move the gradient down a little bit. So it's a little bit more subtle, just like a bit of a colored haze. And that's pretty clean. And by pretty clean, I mean very clean. So if I add Thief to it, maybe I think Thief could do with like, a bit of a stronger color diff. But if I, change it to be something more suitable, maybe divide it out a little bit more, then we get a bit of that haze. You know what I mean? So we've got these regular white emissive lights kind of defining like the main lighting. And then we've got a bit of color interest coming in afterwards. Now, like I said, this is actually using Studio Cage 9 for lighting, minus the volume cube and all that. I added that afterwards. So I've got my Afterglow asset library here, which is available on Gumroad. It's completely optional, but it is a really large package. Studio Cage 9 is under the Studio Cages category. So you can see here it's a dark one that's got a little bit of color, and I've got it included under the camera pivot. What I might do is maybe hide it under a separate collection that I can disable. And obviously I did make some changes to it because the light catcher by default in Studio Cage 9 is actually darker, which still looks cool as it is. So stylistic choice ahoy. But for example, I could drag in anything else really. 7 could be moody if I get that unpacked. It's very much like a lower light type. Pretty cool though. I mean, you could replace that with any other kind of pattern you like and it looks good. Let's try 6. 6 is a bit more like backlight focused, so you get like a harsher like boundary around the edge. I think I liked using this for fossil scans. 5 may be quite an intense one because it's got a lot of different like light source directions, as you can see represented by all the emissive disks around the object. But I actually quite like this. That's quite sharp. We can improve it. I can hide the base. What I'll do is I'll put it under the camera collection. I'm going to use my own Modular Workspaces add-on. Sorry for the plug. You don't have to do this. You can press Control-A, make instances real, and just organize it however you like. But I'm going to use my add-on setup selected only. I won't center it because I've got it where I want. I won't organize. I'll keep it where it is. Let's go. I'll grab all of those and I'll put them into a new collection, Studio Cage 5. An important thing to know as well is that as I'm dragging these in, I have my import settings set to instance collections when linking and when appending. The reason for that is because these are collection assets which contain more than one object. And by keeping them as instances, I get more functionality out of them when unpacking with my own add-ons. So this is just a custom workflow of mine. Actually, that looks pretty sick, to be fair. That was just a mistake. I'll get rid of that. But I want to let you know what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. So I'll let you know about those extra settings. Okay, so on the background, we've got like an extra light here that we may not even need. But I can go into the object settings and disable revisibility camera, and that should hide it. We have other options as well. So we can keep the glossy, keep the diffuse if needed. We could raise it up. Obviously, with camera sources in the ground, there may be some issues, and you'll notice that a shadow is being projected. That may also be due to a light from above providing a shadow. You can play with the ray visibility however you like, or maybe even light linking really. I kind of avoid light linking a little bit just because I am so focused on trying to do things as like physically real in the 3D space as possible, but it's entirely up to you. So this is a very complex surface area light setup. And now I'm just going to delete what I don't need and pivot or parent these to the camera pivot. And then from here, there we go, I can rotate it around and we pretty much get to see our entire character all the way around without actually moving the character. Obviously, you could move the character if you liked, no right or wrong way. But for me, what this means is, say, for example, I get a camera into a position that I quite like. Again, I'm going to go into my corner view and move the depth of field where I want it. Because all of the cameras are associated together with the pivot, once they're in a position I like, they're always going to be appropriate. Like they're all going to update at the same time in the same place, same angle, etc. So I just jumped to the third camera here, which I wasn't even looking at before. It was already in the perfect place for a character. So now we've got like 3 shots that look really good. Again, sometimes it's nice combining these lighting styles with like, a brighter background. I mean, that's very clean, very clinical. There's a little bit of bloom going on in the compositor. The saturation and hue saturation value nodes aren't actually really doing anything at the moment, but it is quite fun to like grayscale things as well if needed. So you see there's a bit of bloom, and then I've got my own denoise mix node here. What this is useful for is for giving me like pretty much a percentage value in the form of a decimal when I'm rendering the final render as to how denoised I want it to be. I don't really need to worry about that in the regular viewport though. So we can get some lovely captures here of Thief being one of the shells, one of the characters in the game. And you can see that with the right kind of lighting, it just it makes all the difference. Good bit of lighting, good position of a depth of field object. We could render out a cool animation. In the case of these shells, I'm trying to keep them in like relatively the same position. So you see now I just enabled Assassin and it's already posed. Like the position is already appropriate. This should be true for the other positions as well. Although he's a little bit offset on the first camera, but that's okay. We'll forgive him. We've got Vandal, Triage. I might actually darken the background a little bit again. And Recon, who's my main in the game. Although they could do with a little buff in game. But this particular background is quite complementary for the color of the shell. But like I said, it is fun to actually, finally play around a bit more with other people's models because it gives me like better use cases for my own tools. And I kind of came to the realization that I might actually want to stick with Studio Cage 9 as like my default lighting for future startup files. So there we got 5 and 9. And 9 has a teeny bit more color in it. It's actually one of the only cages that has additional color. It's a bit more daylight simulating, which you could probably tell from the comparison. It's only subtle. Okay, so let me show you again. 5, which is very white and maybe slightly blue tinted, and 9, which has a slight bit of orange in there. You can actually see a little bit of temperature in the reflection there. So both of these are cool, but they're kind of, different purposes. Actually, now I'm looking at it, I don't really know what I would want to settle on for a default because I like both of them. But there's even more cages and there's even environments. I didn't even try the environments. I always quite like Studio 6. Let's take a look. We'll need to scale that up quite a bit. Okay, that's unpacked into the collection. So now, again, without even needing to do anything to like the camera position, we now have an environment with a modifiable floor. There we go. I can change the gradient so we can see that reflecting on Recon. Perfect. And again, gradient. We can do color changes. We can do all sorts. Let me flip the direction. Let's give Assassin a bit of love because he's a little bit edgy. Maybe he gets left out a bit, but he's got quite a smooth face here. So it's probably good at reflecting the light. So front lit, back lit, edgy silhouette. Change the color. Let's do like a red strip. Marathon has quite like a vibrant and emissive thing going on in it in places. So I'm doing mostly red and then like a slight blue strip. That's kind of interesting. If I extend the black to come out a bit more. So we've got red and then blue. That's kind of cool. If I rotate the pivot. I'm literally just like improvising at the moment. Oh, this might fit the vibe of Vandal a bit more. I quite like that. So we got like the ground reflecting off of her equipment. Of course, you can see the low poly from the extracted models, but that's good. I like how the background there like shifts color. That is pretty cool. So there's a lot of room for experimentation. I should probably like close this up now. I can experiment for days. But yeah, Afterglow is available on Gumroad. And by the way, I will hide a 50% discount code somewhere in this video. It will have free uses. So if you spotted it, you can use it or pass it on to someone who would want it. I don't really mind. That only applies on Gumroad. I'm going to keep having fun and get ready for other projects. If you made it this far through the video, consider putting a robot emoji in the comments. And that way I'll know that you're part of the club. Also, you can sign up to my Patreon to help fund free project development for the Blender community. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Today, I want to tell you about Joe Thornton. Joe is a mixed skill set artist who specializes in creating impactful advertisement material for brands looking to showcase their products. Having worked with major IPs, he certainly has a lot of experience in translating brand requirements into performant content. There is a lot to explore on his website, including a compilation reel which serves as a good demonstration of the range of projects he's been involved with, so I definitely recommend looking around. While he is capable of helping with a great variety of projects, Joe has expressed a particular interest in the idea of helping people produce indie video game trailers, so if there's anyone in the community interested, then please don't be shy. There are a couple of ways you can get in contact with Joe. One is by contacting him directly, or another way is by filling out the form on my services page, and from there I will connect you together. Otherwise, if there is any other work you need doing and you're having trouble finding an artist to help, then just let me know and I'll see if I can find someone suitable. Thank you and have a great day.